Apple has had some seriously rough times in its history. I'm talking about major product failures, legal battles, and controversies. But today, we're diving deep into the darkest moments of Apple, and we will learn how a little lie can turn into a trillion-dollar company. Alright, let's kick things off with the infamous bendgate incident. Picture this. It's 2014 and Apple just dropped the iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus. People were hyped. Little did they know, these phones had a secret. They were bendable. Yeah, you heard me right. If you put a little pressure near the volume button, bam! Your phone's gonna bend like a pretzel and break. At first, it wasn't a huge deal, but then the YouTube channel called Unbox Therapy dropped a bombshell. They uploaded a video bending the iPhone 6 like it was made of rubber, and guess what? It actually bent. Unbox Therapy probably had no clue that this video would rock the Apple headquarters to its cores. I mean, it went viral, man, like crazy viral. In just 3 days, that video racked up over 45 million views. Mind-blowing, right? So yeah, that whole bendgate thing was a major hardware failure for Apple. But hey, they bounced back, and that's just one of the many wild moments in Apple's history. Alright, let's spill the tea on Apple's shady moves during the whole bendgate fiasco. At first, Apple didn't even have the guts to admit the truth. They brushed it off, saying they only received a measly 9 customer complaints. Like seriously, we all knew that was a load of bull. If it was no biggie, why did they try to hush it up? Here's the deal. Apple has some serious control over the tech news media. They basically have those guys in their back pocket. So, they told the media to keep their mouths shut and not let the viral video spread like wildfire. Sneaky, right? But that's how Apple rolls. To make things right, Apple invited a few news outlets to their fancy testing lab. They wanted to show off their so-called best performances. But guess what? They were testing it all wrong. Instead of putting pressure near the volume button, where the bending actually happened, they were forcing it in the center of the phone. Now that's what I call a major blunder. Of course, all the news media jumped on the bandwagon and declared the Unbox Therapy video as a fake news. It was a whole drama. But you know what they say? The truth always finds its way to the surface. Fast forward in 2018, when Apple was dragged to court over this mess, internal documents spilled the beans. Turns out, Apple knew about the bending issues all along. According to those documents, the iPhone 6 was 3.3 times more likely to bend than the iPhone 5s. And the iPhone 6 Plus was a whopping 7.2 times more likely to bend. Yikes. But did Apple own up to it? Nope. They stuck to their guns, claiming that there was no engineering issue and that their precious phones couldn't be bent. Talking about denial, right? The public was furious, and rightfully so. Finally, Apple decided to do some damage control. They slyly fixed the manufacturing issue in their upcoming cell phones, hoping we'd all forget about their lies. Nice try, Apple, but we're on to you. And guess what? This is just the tip of the iceberg. It's time to let's dive into Apple's next big scandal, Antennagate. Because we're going back in time to June 24, 2010, when the iPhone 4 hit the shelves worldwide. Picture this. Long lines outside Apple stores, people hyped up to get their hands on the latest and greatest. But little did they know, trouble was brewing. As soon as Apple started using their shiny new iPhones, they noticed something fishy. Network issues, dropped calls, and you name it. And there's the kicker. It happened when they held their phone in their left hand. Talk about a major facepalm moment. First user who wasted no time in reporting this problem named FF Architect, saying things like, "Yo, my reception bars are all messed up. Is this some glitch or is my phone just jacked?" And another user chimed in saying, "Dude, it's because your left hand is blocking the antenna. That's the real issue here. Normally, that part isn't covered during a regular convo." And guess what? That user hit the nail on the head. That was the actual problem. But did Apple own up to it? No. Steve Jobs himself had the audacity to tell people, hey, all phones have sensitive areas. Just avoid holding it like that. Can you believe it? They basically blamed the users for holding their phones wrong. Classic Apple move, am I right? But let me tell you, that response didn't sit well with the public. It was a disaster for Apple. If only they had acknowledged the issue and fixed it right away, things might have turned out differently. It was determined that people were holding the iPhone 4 in a way that caused signal issues. Apple acknowledged the problem and stated that a software update would be released within a few weeks to address the issue. However, this did not fully resolve the problem, leading to a decrease in recommendations for the iPhone 4. After a month, it was revealed that during the design phase of Samsung phones, Apple's senior antenna expert had warned Steve Jobs about the potential for dropped calls due to the antenna design. This was a significant mistake on Apple's part, as they compromised the functionality of the phone in order to present it as aesthetically pleasing. Additionally, it was discovered that using a bumper-fitted case on the iPhone 4 could help resolve the signal issue. In July, Steve Jobs publicly acknowledged the mistake and referred to it as Antennagate. To address the concerns of Apple users, Steve Jobs offered several options, including providing free bumper-fitted cases or issuing refunds for those who already had a bumper case. This issue quickly became one of the biggest scandals in Apple's history, highlighting the company's need to address and resolve such problems. While Apple may be able to move on from these issues, it remains uncertain how they will handle future challenges. Alright folks, let's dig into the next juicy scandal in Apple's history, the supply chain controversy. Apple is riding high on the success of their products, but behind the scenes, there's a whole lot of shady stuff going on. Now, you would think that Apple, being the tech giant they are, has everything under control. Well, not quite. It all started when reports surfaced that Apple's supply chain was far from squeaky clean. We're talking about labor violations, poor working conditions, and even child labor allegations. In 2014, China passed a labor law to protect workers' rights. It stated that no more than 10% of a factory's workforce should be temporary workers. All companies were given a deadline until 2016 to fix this issue. When Apple finally decided to take action, they conducted checks on their 362 supply factories. And guess what they found? More than half of those factories had way more than 10% temporary workers. And shockingly, among 80 factories, temporary workers are more than half of their labor force. But wait, it gets even worse. As the controversy unfolded, it was revealed that Apple's senior executives were warned about these supply chain problems. They knew what was going on, but they chose to ignore it. They were turning a blind eye to all these issues just to keep their profit margins sky high. It's like they were prioritizing money over people. That's a whole lot of disregard for the law. But let's not forget about the real victims here, the temporary workers. These poor souls were treated like garbage. Their salaries were cut, they were paid late, and they were denied bonuses and additional benefits. It's like they were treated as permanent employees without any of the perks. This scandal didn't just blow over quietly. Instead, it grabbed headlines and fueled anger from both consumers and activists. Apple found itself under fire, with people everywhere demanding accountability and meaningful change. In an attempt to save face, Apple made some half-hearted promises to improve its supply chain practices. They threw around terms like audits and inspections, but genuinely, they have no intention of delivering on those promises. They knew they had to do something to stay ahead of the game, and that's where things get a little shady when it comes to maximizing their profits. Apple doesn't mind if its suppliers exploit their workers. They turn a blind eye to the conditions of their employees, all in the name of making more money. And here's a red flag for you. Apple actively opposed a bill targeting forced labor in China. Why? Simply because they didn't want anything disrupting their supply chain. This whole supply chain controversy is a major stain on Apple's reputation. They can try to run from it, but the truth always has a way of catching up. It's clear that Apple's main focus is on their profits, not on taking care of their employees or doing what's right. And that's where Samsung comes in. Let's talk about Apple's biggest rival, Samsung. The iPhone versus Samsung debate has been going on for ages, and trust me, there is no love lost between these two tech giants. Apple knew it right from the start that Nokia was no threat to them. They were already down and out. But Samsung, that's a whole different story. Apple and Samsung have had their fair share of clashes. They've been at each other's throats, fighting tooth and nail for the top spot in the smartphone market. It's like a never-ending battle of innovation and features. But here's the thing, Apple didn't just sit back and watch. Samsung was Apple's biggest competition, and you can bet there's been some serious tension between these two tech giants. So we're diving into the epic battle between Apple and Samsung. It's a tale of lawsuits, design patents, and a whole lot of money. It all started back in 2007, before the iPhone even hit the market. Apple filed a lawsuit, claiming that Samsung had stolen not one, not two, but 4 of their design patents. Fast forward to June of the same year, Apple presented a whopping 193 screenshots that supposedly proved the similarities between iOS and Samsung's UI. They accused Samsung of copying elements from their iPhones, as well as devices like the Nexus, Galaxy S4G, and Galaxy Tabs. It was a full-on showdown. But here's the twist. Apple wasn't playing fair either. They were caught editing those screenshots, tweaking them to fit their narrative. Sneaky, right? Samsung wasn't about to take this lying down. They fired back with a countersuit of their own, and the battle raged on for years. It was a back-and-forth, blow-by-blow fight that kept everyone on the edge of their seats. And finally, in June 2018, a verdict was reached. Samsung was ordered to pay Apple a whopping $539 million. Now that's a hefty sum. But let's be real here. After all those years of legal battles, some experts were left scratching their heads. Was this really about justice? Or was it all about the money? In the end, Apple walked away with $539 million, far from the $2 billion they were aiming for. It's a fakery, no doubt, but was it worth all the time and effort? That's up for debate. So, there you have it. The Apple vs. Samsung saga is filled with twists, turns, and a whole lot of cash. One more dark moment of Apple was about taxes. Apple had this sweet deal going on with Ireland when it came to taxes. They set up shop there because Ireland was like a tax haven, you know? They offered all these perks to foreign investors, like low or even zero taxes. It was a dream come true for companies like Apple. But here's where the trouble starts. The European Union wasn't too happy about this arrangement. They felt like Apple was using some shady tactics to avoid paying their fair share of taxes. And let me tell you, the European Union wasn't about to let them get away with it. In 2016, the European Union dropped the hammer on Apple and ordered them to cough up a whopping $14.5 billion to Ireland. The European Union claimed that Apple had been using illegal methods to dodge its tax obligations. Now, let's dig into the nitty-gritty of this argument. You see, when a company sets up a subsidiary in a tax haven country, like Ireland in this case, they can funnel their profits through that subsidiary and avoid paying taxes in their own country. Sneaky, right? So, Apple was basically using Ireland as their tax haven getaway. They were sending their profits there and not paying their fair share in other countries. And the European Union wasn't having any of it. They wanted Apple to pay up and play by the rules. Now, this whole situation put Apple in a bit of a pickle. They had to defend their tax practices and fight against the European Union's claims. It was a messy legal battle. In the end, Apple may have won some battles, but they still had to pay up. It was a win for the European Union, but Apple definitely didn't come out of it unscathed. It just goes on to show that even the biggest tech giants can't escape the long arm of the taxman. Apple made the sweetheart agreement with Ireland where they would pay lower taxes compared to other companies. In the US, they pay 21%, but in Ireland, they only have to cough up 12.5%. Sounds like a pretty sweet deal, right? But hold up, things took a dark turn when the European Union decided to investigate. They found out that Apple was only paying a measly 1% or even 0.5% in taxes instead of the agreed upon 12.5%. That's some serious manipulation of the system. Unsurprisingly, the European Union wasn't pleased with Apple's tax practices. They questioned why the Irish government seemed to be favoring Apple, allowing them to evade significant tax obligations. There was drama, there were accusations, and it seemed like the whole world was watching. But guess what? In 2020, the court made a decision in favor of Apple. They got away with it. Now here's where things get interesting. It's not just about the legal system, it's about morals. People were outraged that Apple, being this massive corporation, was getting away with not paying their fair share of taxes in their own home country, where the tax rate could be as high as 25%. But in Ireland, they were only paying a measly 1%. This whole controversy put Apple in the spotlight, and not in a good way. People were calling them out for their false promises and their misuse of power and control. It's like they thought they were above the rules that applied to everyone else. But let's be real here. Apple isn't the only company that has pulled off these tax tricks. They just happen to get caught in a big way. It's a classic case of a big corporation exploiting the loopholes in the US tax system. So there you have it, the dark moment for Apple was when its tax evasion tactics were exposed. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Stay tuned for more exciting tech videos. See you in the next one.